The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Now, back to your turn on 1330 WEBY, Northwest Florida's talk radio. The phone lines are open, so call in and join the conversation at 623-1330.
Welcome back to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, 1330 WEBY. Carl speaks with ontological certitude and theological indubitableness. For you liberals out there, this means that Carl knows who he is and that he is unashamed to be on a first-name basis with God. Now, here's Carl Gallups.
All right. Welcome back, Gulf Coast. Welcome back, America. And welcome back, world. Freedom Friday. Carl Gallups. Mallory Bardwell, your world-famous producer. Yeah, you know, the more I think about it, I'm going to go ahead and out Tom Arnold, so to speak. I don't think he was a 30-year lawman. I think he was an Obama bot. And I mean, I don't know. I may have to eat my words, but I really think he was an Obama bot because this is what they do. They do these disinformation campaigns trying to plant seeds of doubt. Now, that's what he was doing. He tried to act like he was a law enforcement friend, but his very first question gave him away. If he was a 30-year lawman, he would know the answer to that question. And he wasn't throwing me a softball. He asked it with anger in his voice, as though he were a real lawman, and why was this like this? But now, I've spent 10 years in law enforcement. He said he was a 30-year lawman, and I know the answer to the question. It's basic, Cop 101. He should have known the answer to that. But the fact that he didn't tells me that he is not a 30-year lawman. So anyway, another Obama bot. But forget them. Let's move on now, because now we have attorney Larry Klayman with us. And Larry, first of all, let me just welcome you to Freedom Friday. What an honor to have you.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, man, glad you're here, and we will have you back, I am certain, in the future. But, folks, let me tell you about Larry Klayman. He's the founder and former chairman of Judicial Watch, a public interest and nonprofit law firm, which attained notoriety throughout the initiation of 18 civil lawsuits against the Clinton administration, and lawsuit against Dick Cheney to obtain information about the White House Energy Task Force, etc. During the Ronald Reagan administration, Larry Klayman was a prosecutor in the United States Justice Department, and he was on the trial team that succeeded in breaking up the telephone monopoly of AT&T. Larry ran for the United States Senate in 2003. He is the author of a couple of top-selling books. He writes a weekly column for the conservative news website WorldNet Daily. He is also the attorney for Sheriff Joe Arpaio organization in that recall action going on in Arizona. I'm going to get him to tell you folks about that. Larry, I read something about you today. Verify this, that you became so famous for fighting corruption in government that the TV series West Wing actually created a character about you, played by actor John Deal, and they call
that's where the name actually Freedom Watch comes from, because they created a Harry Claypool of Freedom Watch.
Yeah.
Larry Klayman Judicial Watch.
Do you know, I own that series, and I've watched it several times, and I know who Harry Claypool is, and so that's supposed to be you, right?
That's scary.
That's scary. That is scary. That's amazing. Well, Larry Klayman, we're so glad that you're with us, and your website is freedomwatchusa.org. Freedomwatchusa.org, correct?
Correct.
All right, good deal. Well, Larry, first of all, some breaking news. I know you probably don't have any inside scoop, but just tell us what you do know and maybe how folks out there in Arizona feel about it, if you have any feel for that. But apparently a bomb was sent to Arpaio, but it was intercepted, but a real bomb. I mean, somebody was trying to kill him, I guess, huh?
That's the viciousness of what's going on, not just in Arizona, but in the country today, is that heroes like Sheriff Joe, who stand for something, are targets, and we've all been targets over the years. And so consequently, it comes as no surprise. I don't know who sent it. I can pretty much guess, but I'm not going to speculate,
right,
on the air.
Right.
But I do know this, and this is quite apart from whoever sent this bomb, is that we have radical homosexual groups and radical pro-illegal immigrant groups that are opposing Sheriff Joe. Mm-hmm. With regard to this attempted recall of him in Arizona.
Right.
And, it's part of the whole leftist agenda to eliminate any conservative that they can find.
Right. Right.
He's in the line of fire.
Right. Why would the radical homosexual lobby be after him specifically?
Well, you have to ask them for that.
Oh, okay.
I think it's the fact that they view every conservative as anti-gay, regardless of who they are.
Yeah, I got you.
I've come up with that in my own world, and from a human perspective, I'm not a homophobe or anything like that.
Right.
But they take it personally, and they try to remove people. The other possible reason is that Sheriff Joe makes his inmates wear pink underwear.
Larry Klayman, you might be onto something there. But let me say, no, I understand your explanation, because I too, in my life of ministry, and then of course my radio life, and then my all the internet work I do, and I too have come under a lot of attack from the radical homosexual community and movement, and like you, I find myself having to always justify and say, now look, I'm not a homophobe, and I'm not out to hurt a single homosexual, but I'm trying to preserve marriage, home, and family, and the culture, and the foundation of our culture, et cetera, et cetera. Well, of course, they think that we hate them, and then next thing you know, we're right in their line of fire. And that's probably where Arpaio falls in all this.
Yeah, and they're vicious, too.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying that that's the cause here. We don't really know.
No. I know. You made that very clear, so thank you for that. But, okay, so golly, so it's a real bomb, and apparently it was really sent to him, and you do know that for a fact, huh?
Well, I know from the articles that have been published, and from some other sources.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. Listen, tell us about the Arpaio recall campaign. You are involved in that, and you are involved as attorney and with the Arpaio folks trying to preserve his election. Tell us what that is. It seems insidious to me that a man is duly elected, and within weeks of that election, there's a recall? I mean, is that even legal? How can you recall? I'd think you could only recall somebody if they did something wrong.
It isn't legal, and I represent a group that was put together of people who, do support Sheriff Joe, called Citizens to Protect Fair Election Results. You can learn more about that on our website.
Okay.
On my website, LarryKlayman.com. I took this case in my personal capacity.
Okay.
Because I believe strongly in trying to prevent this from happening. Under Arizona law, under its Constitution, you cannot have a recall petition verified by the state, regardless of whether you get the number of signatures that are required or not, and it's over 300,000, unless that elected official has been in office for 6 months. And you're right, is that just 7 days after Sheriff Joe was sworn in as sheriff, given he was reelected,
right,
this recall petition was started, and consequently we went into court about 2 weeks ago. We sued various election officials in Arizona, and we sued this radical leftist group called Respect Arizona, which, of course, they disrespect the voters of Arizona because they chose Sheriff Joe. We sued them for misusing the legal system, and we sued the state to have them stop this recall, which is illegal, and when the signatures are presented that Respect Arizona has obtained, they should simply be thrown into the trash because they're void. There's no legal basis for them.
Right. Now, help me understand. What is the Arizona law? What's the process for recall? I mean, I'm still just bumfuzzled that it even has gone this far, Larry. I can't imagine that a man would be elected and 7 days later there's some sort of a quasi-legal effort at recall. What's Arizona law?
Well, particularly given the fact that nothing changed between the date of the election and his swearing in and 7 days. I mean, assuming that you could bring a recall petition earlier than 6 months into the sheriff's term, he didn't do anything different than what he was doing before, which was the reason he was reelected.
Right.
So it was obviously an effort to try to throw a monkey wrench into his enforcement of the law, and we've alleged that.
Right.
And it's an effort to harass one of the finest public servants in this country.
Yeah.
And the precedent of this is terrible because although the recalls can be legitimate under legitimate purposes and circumstances, it's not legitimate here. And if this was permitted, then even the judge who has our case could be recalled for doing nothing.
Right. Well, that's where I was going to go next. Where does this end? And not only that, but isn't this really nothing more than the subverting of a lawful election?
It is. And it tells you something about where we are today, in this country, is that, on the other side of the coin, and we can talk about this more some other time, I'm sure, this is a big question, is that I don't think we have a republic anymore, with the exception of a few fine public servants like Sheriff Joe, is that most of our representatives either, act in a malevolent or negligent way or don't do anything at all. I mean, we've seen that. And, just today we're faced with the prospect of nuclear war with North Korea, and we learned yesterday that, in fact, they do have the capability to have missiles with nuclear tips after everyone's been lying to us, Democrat and Republican, up to this point in time. So it's ironic that the one guy who actually is doing his job and who deserves to be paid by the taxpayer is subject to this kind of harassment when nearly all of Washington, D.C. goes merrily along at taxpayer expense and is either just serving this country or, frankly, doing nothing but, counting their shekels as they go to the bank.
That's a wonderful way to put it, Larry, and I would love to have you back on for us to explore that in depth, because I have said many times on this radio program before I ever spoke to you and had you on the air that I do not believe right now that we are living in a constitutional republic. We're living in a banana republic, beginning with the commander-in-chief who has yet to present a lawful identifying document.
Well, and not only banana republic, we're living in a dictatorship.
Yeah.
In effect, I think that Obama is worse than King George III. I think we're in worse shape than we were in 1776 when the colonies were rich and when the biggest complaint was simply the failure to pay taxes.
Right.
So, or the taxation. But now we've got somebody who's trying to subvert basically all of the tenets of the Founding Fathers. And, of course, he started with defrauding the American people over his natural-born citizenship, of which he is not.
Right.
And we have an imposter in the White House who's more loyal to foreign countries than he is to our own country.
I couldn't agree more. Larry, we've got to take a quick time out. When we come back, I'm going to ask you about what you have going on in Florida and the Supreme Court regarding Obama's ballot eligibility. Would you enlighten us on that?
Look forward to it.
Okay, me as well. Folks, you are listening to Freedom Friday. Our guest this afternoon, Attorney Larry Klayman. I'll tell you more about him on the other side. When we come back, we'll have Attorney Larry Klayman back with us, and he will educate us, elucidate us, and illuminate us concerning the Florida case before the Supreme Court and Obama's eligibility. We'll have Larry Klayman tell us all about that when we come back. Freedom Friday, Carl Gallups. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.